is going on, everyone? Welcome back to this week's installment on The Lake Show, and I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day again. So last week, I discussed the Nico Iamaleava NIL situation that took place with the Tennessee Volunteers. So Nico Iamaleava held out for, I'm willing to bet he got bad advice from people from his inner circle. I mean, he was already making a good amount of money for being Tennessee's quarterback with the NIL collective that was there. And he held out for he wanted at least $4 million guaranteed for that year, which is kind of silly just because, he didn't really do much in any of the big games that he was in last year. He didn't necessarily, even though they beat Alabama, they didn't look good against Alabama. They lost to Georgia, and they got steamrolled by Ohio State in the college football playoff. When you look at this whole NIL situation, it's gotten completely out of hand. What was NIL intended to be? Name, image, likeness. Basically marketing for players to bring in an influx of cash and capital into their institutions and into their football program. The only person I can see making $4 million is Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State. Even me, you all know me. I am a diehard Miami fan. There is no way on earth I believe Carson Beck is worth $4 million a year in college. Right now, as it stands, Cam Ward was a finalist for the Heisman, Davey O'Brien winner, led the nation in passing touchdowns, was, one of the best college quarterbacks this past year. He only made around 1.3 to 1.4 million from NIL. Carson Beck nearly quadruples it of what Cam Ward made. So, there's a big problem, in my opinion, when it comes to NIL in general, what it was originally meant for. Instead, now it's just become a bidding war. So any booster at any school can just pull out their checkbook. Oh, you need a wide receiver or you need a quarterback? Good, just bust open the checkbook and then just go pay them. That's not what NIL was intended to be. But it's the world we live in. Nico Iamaleava, no longer at the University of Tennessee. He is now a UCLA Bruin, and we are going to see how he holds up in the Big Ten. And as you all know, I'm a Bucked Up ambassador, so use promo code SHOW32. Get yourself 20% off any and all pre-workout orders at buckedup.com. And as you all know, this past Sunday was Easter. Happy Easter to everybody. And he is risen. The one true God, the one true King, the King of Kings, Jesus Christ has risen. The most important day in history. And, I can't thank him enough for just being with me every single step of the way in my life. And I know for a fact he will never, ever abandon us because he is the ultimate source of happiness and love and peace at any aspect of our lives. So the one true King, he is risen, everybody, and I hope you all had a great Easter. So what are we going to do today? Well, I am giving you guys my mock draft 3.0. As we all know, the NFL draft this upcoming Thursday takes place, so I'm giving you all my entire first round mock draft 3.0 with absolutely no trades. This is just how I would see things if there was no trades in the draft order, no switching places whatsoever. This is who if I was a GM in the NFL, this is who I think that these teams should take. And if I'm an analyst, and if I was an analyst, for ESPN, this is who I think they should be taking. So with that being said, we are going to get started with my 2025 NFL mock draft 3.0. All right. I think we're ready to go. So with the first overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft, the Tennessee Titans are going to select quarterback Cam Ward. So when it comes to the Tennessee Titans, their quarterback room is absolutely horrendous last year. You got Will Levis throwing picks left and right, and you also had Mason Rudolph throwing picks left and right. I believe I saw a stat that it said Tennessee's quarterback room combined for a 22 passing touchdowns and 21 interceptions. You can't get much worse than that. So Cam Ward, I think it makes the most sense. They have they have okay weapons, they have an okay offensive line. He fits the scheme of what the head coach wants to run. I think Cam Ward will instantly be a game changer, especially in that division. You have the Colts, you have the Texans, you have the Jaguars. It's a very hit and miss division. So Cam Ward can easily come in with the talent that he provides and the leadership. He can easily flip this team around and probably make them a playoff contender within his first year. This is a very winnable division. So I have the Tennessee Titans taking Cam Ward first overall. With the second overall pick, the Cleveland Browns are going to take wide receiver and cornerback Travis Hunter. I have been flopping back and forth between three guys for the past 2 months when it comes to this pick. But since Cleveland has signed Joe Flacco, and since Cleveland has already Deshaun Watson, Kenny Pickett on roster, I'm not willing to believe that Cleveland is going to be drafting a quarterback. So at the second pick, I have Travis Hunter, someone who can change the dynamic. Do I think he's the best wide receiver in the draft? No. Do I think he's the best cornerback in the draft? No. But I do think he's like an A- at both positions. So I think Cleveland, that's something that they desperately need. They can provide a spark on defense and on offense and give their quarterback, whoever it may be, some help. I have Travis Hunter going second to the Cleveland Browns. Okay, with the third overall pick, the New York Giants are going to select quarterback Shedeur Sanders. I don't buy for 1 second that he's going to drop to the 20s or even out of the first round, especially with how many teams actually need quarterbacks that are in the first round. Listen, Tommy DeVito, Jameis Winston on the New York Giants, I'm willing to bet that at least one or both of them can possibly be cut by camp. So I think, you brought in Russell Wilson. I think you do yourself a big service to the team if you draft Shedeur Sanders at this position and, start building for the future. I think that's what the Giants need right now. I think they need quarterback. So that's who I have the New York Giants selecting. Shedeur Sanders, quarterback from Colorado. Okay, number 4 overall pick, the New England Patriots are going to select Abdul Carter, edge rusher from Penn State. I only say this because, as much as I would like to get Tet McMillan there, I think that's a little too high to draft Tet McMillan, especially since Abdul Carter would still be here at this point, in my opinion. It's a very deep wide receiver draft, so you can get Drake May some help in the later rounds, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. But as far as New England's pass rush, I believe they had the second fewest sacks in the NFL last year. So I think you bring in a guy who will be a day one starter and can instantly provide a spark for a defense that desperately needs to get to the quarterback. Okay, with the 5th overall pick, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars selecting big defensive tackle Mason Graham from Michigan. Now, a lot of people are saying that he has a low ceiling, but, when I watched Mason Graham against Ohio State the past few times, he owns them in the trenches. He owns a lot of teams in the trenches. I think it's a very important, position that needs filled for Jacksonville, that you just continuously add to an already stacked defensive line. So at least you're going to be, formidable up front. The back end will need some help eventually, but I think you go best available at this point and, best available defensive player. So I would take Mason Graham, defensive tackle from Michigan. Now we got the 6th overall pick. We got the Las Vegas Raiders, and they're going to select running back Ashton Genty from Boise State. When you look at Pete Carroll and when you look at all the success that he's had as a coach in his career at USC, Reggie Bush, Lendale White, when he was in Seattle, Marshawn Lynch, he has always had great success when he had a bell cow back or two, running the rock and opening up play action for his quarterback. They have Geno Smith. Geno Smith is actually a pretty good quarterback when he has a run game. So when he's able to work off of that play action rather than throw it from 3rd and 13 and 3rd and 12 every other drive, I think this makes the most sense for the Las Vegas Raiders because they do not have, a deep running back. They have Jacoby Myers, they have Brock Bowers, they have an okay offensive line. I think that you need a run game now, and I think that'll actually allow Geno Smith to thrive in Las Vegas. So I have the Las Vegas Raiders taking Ashton Genty. Excuse me. With the 7th overall pick, I have the New York Jets taking Tyler Warren. This kid runs like a running back, but he's built like a tight end because he is obviously a tight end, but he has great hands, great skills. He's a really, he's like a Swiss Army knife. He reminds me of like a more athletic, more well-rounded like Taysom Hill. They had him throw passes in the USC game this past year, but right now I would personally have Tyler Warren going to the New York Jets. They already have Garrett Wilson. They have Breece Hall. They have Braylon Allen. They definitely need tight end help because I think out of the New York Jets tight end room, I think they have the least amount of touchdown catches or something like that in the past 2 years in the NFL. So I think you add a guy like Tyler Warren who can run like a running back and block like a physical tight end and actually catch the ball like a receiver. So I think that Tyler Warren makes the most sense for the Jets. 8th overall pick, I have the Carolina Panthers selecting Tet McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona. If there's one thing that Bryce Young needs right now, it is help on the offensive side. They have Chuba Hubbard at the running back position. I think that'll help Bryce out a little bit, but you need a number one wide receiver. You need something like that in Carolina. If you want Bryce Young to succeed, he's got to at least have somebody to throw the football to. So that's who I have at number 8, Tet McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona. Excuse me, guys. All right, with the 9th overall pick, I have the New Orleans Saints selecting cornerback Will Johnson. Will Johnson, when he's not injured, could easily be, when he's not injured, he can easily be a top lockdown corner in the NFL. I think day one, if he's healthy, he can be a lockdown corner day one as soon as he steps on the football field in the NFL. He was that dog when he was at Michigan. Obviously, he dealt with some injuries early in the season and late in the season. The injuries are concerning, but if you get him healthy enough, he can be exactly what I feel Sauce Gardner was for the New York Jets his rookie year. I think Will Johnson can have a similar impact. All right, with the 10th overall pick, I have the Chicago Bears taking running back Omarion Hampton. Now, I have Omarion Hampton here because Chicago has all the weapons they need. Chicago has they revamped the offensive line. They did everything they needed to do to make sure that Caleb Williams is successful in Chicago. They also brought in Ben Johnson, a great offensive coordinator from the Lions. So obviously now he has an offensive culture, an offensive play caller that knows what he's doing. By Thanksgiving this year, I'm willing to bet that this is going to be a make or break year for Caleb Williams. Not a make or break year, but this is going to be a reality check. If he does not look good by Thanksgiving this upcoming year, then it's possible that Chicago could be heading in another direction yet again at quarterback. Okay, with the 11th overall pick, I have the San Francisco 49ers taking offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas. So when you look at the 49ers, they still have, now a lot of this team is going to depend on how much they give Brock Purdy, but they do have 11 or 12 draft picks this year, so they do have to hit on a couple of those. I think this is a slam dunk kind of pick. When you get Kelvin Banks, obviously on an older and brittle offensive line, you have a lot of playmakers on this team, but a lot of injury-riddled playmakers like Brandon Ayuk. You have Christian McCaffrey, who basically didn't play at all last year. And you also have Brock Purdy, who is asking basically in the upper 50s to, make every single year as a quarterback. the highest I'd be willing to pay Brock Purdy from a personal level would be like $30 million a year. He's not even remotely close to a Dak Prescott level contract, and even above that. So when you look at the San Francisco 49ers, you have Trent Williams still, who is still solid, but is also getting older. You still need someone to bolster that offensive line. So I think Kelvin Banks Jr. makes a lot of sense for the San Francisco 49ers. Sorry, guys. I accidentally screwed up one of my picks. Yeah, that's crazy. That is actually crazy. But that's okay. I can definitely see Chicago. Yeah, I screwed up one of my picks, guys. I'm sorry. So we're going to scroll back just a little bit. Pick 10. I accidentally picked someone else. So I switched the Dallas pick and I switched the Dallas because I have my cheat sheet right here, and I accidentally looked at the wrong one. So I had Amari and Hampton going to Chicago when that was supposed to be Jalen Walker. So I'll get Jalen Walker off the board here. So realistically, I would have Jalen Walker switched with Chicago. Kelvin Banks will still go to San Francisco, but I have Jalen Walker going to Chicago, and I have Amari and Hampton going to Dallas. Chicago has all the weapons they need. They definitely need to bolster up the edge and help their defense out. So I have Jalen Walker going to Chicago, Kelvin Banks going to San Francisco, and Omari and Hampton going to Dallas. And now I have Omari and Hampton going to Dallas because Dallas has absolutely no run game and absolutely no help on the offensive side of the football other than CeeDee Lamb. So when you look at this, how well is Dallas going to stack up with even their own division? You know, Washington's getting better constantly. Philly's already a superstar. Like, they have superstars everywhere on the defense and offensive side of the football. Giants, we know they're a tire fire. But as far as this, I think if you're Dallas, you have to take a running back in this position. You know, Omari and Hampton might be a little high to take at this position, but I think it would be worth it in the long run just because, you know, Dallas's offensive line isn't terrible, but it could use some work. But I think you need a run game. You know, you got a bunch of nothing in the backfield. So it's going to say on screen that Omari and Hampton to Chicago and Jalen Walker to Dallas, but those are actually switched because of a mistake on my end. Okay, so we're moving on to the Miami Dolphins with the 13th pick, and I have them taking offensive tackle from LSU, Will Campbell. When you look at Will Campbell, you know, he's an absolute menace of a tackle, and I think if you're the Miami Dolphins, you know, you've tried, you know, finesse, you've tried skill position, like left and right, you know, just to bolster up everything else. You know, Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill. How well is that working out for you? How well is that working out in Miami? Realistically, not well at all. Jalen Ramsey's on his way out the door, and Tyreek Hill might as well make his way out the door. So, you know, enough of this, you know, finesse offense stuff, speed, finesse, you know, agility. Get physical in the trenches. Get someone to protect Tua Tagovailoa, because one more injury and one more concussion, I'm willing to bet that Tua would retire. So if I'm Miami, get a tackle. Just get a tackle so you can protect Tua Tagovailoa. All right. The 14th overall pick, I have the Indianapolis Colts taking Armand Membu, tackle from Missouri. You know, Indianapolis is a fascinating team. I know they need a quarterback, but at the same time, when you look at this team, there's not many holes. You know, other than Quentin Nelson on their offensive line, no other lineman played all 17 games. So Quentin Nelson, obviously regarded as one of the best one of the best guards in the NFL. I think you need somebody to help out on the offensive line. I mean, you have great receivers. You have Jonathan Taylor as a running back. You have you have a great defense, you know, a solid defense of that. It's clear that the issue is quarterback. It's clear as day that the issue is quarterback. but maybe Armand Membu will help. You should be running the football more anyways. This will bolster that offensive line and at least provide more protection for Richardson if that indeed is going to be the starter this upcoming year. Okay, when we look at the Atlanta Falcons at 15, I have them taking edge rusher Shedeur Stewart from Texas A&M. When you look at this team in Atlanta, there is not one hole on this team other than edge rusher. They just could not get to the quarterback. The Matthew Judon trade last year did not work. It flopped flat on its face. So I think you have to address edge rusher in this situation. There's no other way that you need to go. You have Kyle Pitts, you have Drake London, you have Darnell Mooney. You have a decent offensive line, you have Michael Penix, you have good safeties, good linebackers, and decent defensive backs. What you guys do not have is a consistent pass rush at all. I believe they had the fewest sacks in the NFL last year, around there. But I think Shedeur Stewart, solid guy from Texas A&M. I think it's very important that you get an edge rusher in this draft. Okay, the 16th overall pick goes to the Arizona Cardinals, and I have them taking Mykel Williams, edge rusher from Georgia. If there's another thing that Arizona needs, they definitely need, an edge rusher. They definitely need help on the defensive side of the football. Kyler Murray and his offense, I think they'll put up points. I think they'll be okay. I don't think they're a playoff team necessarily, but I think that they go with Mykel Williams. Okay, with the 17th overall pick, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. I keep moving that, guys. I'm sorry. I have the Cincinnati Bengals picking edge rusher Mike Green from Marshall. With uncertainty from the Trey Hendrickson situation, I think you bring in his replacement, Mike Green from Marshall. I witnessed this cat in the Senior Bowl absolutely bully SEC tackles and offensive linemen. This cat from Marshall is going to be something special, so I'm willing to believe that the Cincinnati Bengals will draft edge rusher. They could draft defensive back. They could. I would not be mad if they did, but I feel like this makes the most sense right now. Okay, with the Seattle Seahawks at the 18th overall pick, I will have them taking offensive tackle Josh Simmons. If there's one thing that the Seattle Seahawks need right now, it's protection for Sam Darnold, for their new $100 million quarterback. When you look at Sam Darnold, and do I believe that he is a franchise quarterback? No. I think he benefited from the Vikings organization and Kevin O'Connell making, unbelievable play calls and scheming up great offensive plays for Sam Darnold. He really had a resurgence kind of year. That's tough, though, because of DK Metcalf departing, because of Tyler Lockett being released, and all you got is Jackson Smith and Jigba and Noah Fant. But if there's one thing that Sam Darnold is not, and that's mobile, so if anything, you do need offensive line help just to keep him upright. 19th overall pick. I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking linebacker Jahad Campbell from Alabama. When you look at Tampa Bay, there's not many holes there on this team. There's not much I don't like about this team, but I think bolstering up the linebacking core will at least help out the defensive line. At least bolster up the front seven so you can help out in the run game. Denver Broncos with the 20th overall pick. I will have them taking Colston Loveland, tight end from Michigan. When you look at Bo Nix and Denver and Sean Payton and what they've done this past year, obviously they got beat by Josh Allen in the playoffs, but when you look going forward, I think Denver is in a prime position, almost like a Washington kind of situation, just not as great. But when you look at Bo Nix, he played very well last year and obviously got them to the postseason. You have Defensive Player of the Year Patrick Surtain on the other side, and you have Cortland Sutton on the offensive side of the football. You have a lot of good weapons on offense, and as well as Sean Payton's play calling, I think you get a big body tight end to help out and be a safety net for Bo Nix. So I think Denver takes Colston Loveland. Okay, now I've arrived at the 21st overall pick. This one's just super annoying and unfortunate because unfortunately, I don't like the situation whatsoever, and this is based off of Aaron Rodgers not signing with Pittsburgh just yet. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't sign with Pittsburgh this week, the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to take quarterback Jackson Dart. At this point, if you're Pittsburgh, you need to try something. You need to try anything to bring life back to that offense. The Russell Wilson experiment didn't work. Justin Fields didn't work. Mason Rudolph didn't work. Duck Hodges didn't work. Josh Dobbs didn't work. There's a lot of just failure in Pittsburgh from the quarterback position. So at this point, as much as I, have my issues with Jackson Dart and don't think he's a first-round quarterback, I think at this point you have to reach. You have to reach for a quarterback if you're Pittsburgh. If you don't sign Aaron Rodgers, for all I know, he could have already signed as I'm recording this, and he probably didn't. So I have Pittsburgh taking a quarterback, Jackson Dart, from Ole Miss at the 21st overall pick. Okay, the Los Angeles Chargers at 22nd overall, I have them taking wide receiver Matthew Golden from Texas, the absolute speedster. Ladd McConkey, he did okay last year. He had 1,000 yards as a rookie. But when you look at the dynamic of the Chargers, they want to be a run-first team, which they have an incredible offensive line. It was a great decision by Harbaugh and the organization last year to draft, offensive line in the first round. They brought in Najee Harris. They have Justin Herbert. They have Ladd McConkey. I think you got to go get a true number one wide receiver, and I feel like Matthew Golden from Texas can be that. 23rd overall pick, I have the Green Bay Packers taking Jahdae Barron, cornerback from Texas. With the whole Jair Alexander situation, I don't believe he was traded yet, but I believe they're looking to shop him. He's a little bit older. But again, this Green Bay team is still so young on the offensive side and only getting better. I worry about Jordan Love. It looked like he had a step back last year. But going forward, I have faith in Jordan Love that he'll right the ship. So when you look at Green Bay as a whole, I think they definitely need to bolster up the secondary. And Jahdae Barron, best or second best cornerback in the draft, you can make that argument. I have him going to Texas. I have him going to Green Bay. Okay, Minnesota Vikings at 24. You're going to take the best safety in the draft, Malachi Starks. You got to bolster up that secondary. That's a very important aspect. Now, offensive side of the football is going to be interesting because you're bringing back J.J. McCarthy off an injury. We're going to see how well he performs. But when he was on the field, he played fairly well. If there's one thing that, tore up Minnesota last year, it was run games and, deep ball pass games. So when you look at this, Jared Goff tore him up at the end of the year for that number one overall seed. So I think you go get the best safety in the draft, and that's Malachi Starks. Okay, so the Houston Texans at the 25th overall pick, I'm going to have them taking Gray Zabel, interior offensive lineman for North Dakota State. Now, I only do this just because when you look at the Houston Texans, if there's one thing that plagued C.J. Stroud a little bit, one, the injury bug. The injury bug hit Houston hard. But, I think Houston just needs help in the run game, so I think they bolster up that offensive line, especially, keeping C.J. Stroud upright. If there's one thing I've always said is if you want your quarterback to succeed, he can't end up on his backside every other play. So I think you go offensive line to bolster up to bolster it up to keep CJ Stroud upright, and you also, add some depth for the run game to eventually evolve into something better. Man, I hate that this thing keeps moving so weird. But we got the Los Angeles Rams at the 26th overall selection, and I have them taking Emeka Ibuka, wide receiver from Ohio State. With Cooper Kupp going to be gone, with Cooper Kupp gone, I think that they hold on. Did Cooper Kupp? I think Cooper Kupp is gone. Yeah, I think Cooper Kupp is gone. Yeah, because they brought in Devontae Adams. Yeah, okay. I forget where Cooper Kupp went. Either way, when you look at the Rams in general, you have Puka Nacua, you have an old Devontae Adams. I think you bolster up it even more with Emeka Ibuka from Ohio State. Probably one of the best pure pass catchers from the past couple years in college football. And I think that this only further helps out Matthew Stafford because they have a young and impressive defense. They have Kyron Williams in the backfield, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, a good offensive line. I think you go wide receiver in this position if you are the Los Angeles Rams. 27th overall pick, I have the Baltimore Ravens taking Derek Harmon, defensive line from Oregon. There's one thing that, as much as the Ravens need linebacker help, I think you can't hurt to have interior defensive line help because that might take some pressure off of your linebacking core. I think Baltimore will address linebacker later in the draft, but for right now, I think you take best available, and that is Derek Harmon from Oregon. Okay, when you look at the Detroit Lions, they have Aiden Hutchinson, who's coming back from injury, but I'm not worried about Detroit's, offense at all. Their offensive line is still one of the best in the NFL. You have Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. There's a lot to like. So I have the Detroit Lions taking James Pierce Jr., edge rusher from Tennessee. This might be a little bit low, but I think they need more help on the defensive side of the football. I mean, they had 15 or 16 guys on the PUP list last year from defense. So if there's anything that needs help, it's the defensive side of the football, at least to get depth. But I think James Pierce will be a good complement to Aiden Hutchinson on the opposite side of the football. Okay, now we got the Washington Commanders at the 29th overall pick, and I have them taking probably, honestly, my steal of the draft, edge rusher Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College. His size is questionable, but there is no doubt about it that he plays with a high motor, that he plays with intensity and physicality. I think he had double-digit sacks last year. I think the last 2 years in college football. Maybe a little bit undersized, but he makes up for it with quick hands and quick feet. He has a very explosive, first step off of off the edge. I think Donovan Ezaraku personally is going to be a steal of the draft for me. So I have him going 29 to Washington. Okay, when you look at Buffalo, they definitely need help on the defensive side of the football. D-line, edge, safety. I'm going to have them taking South Carolina's Nick Emanwari from South Carolina's safety, Nick Emanwari. I think that Buffalo, if they can shore up their secondary, there's not much I don't like about Buffalo. I think at this point you're adding for depth. The offense is going to be fine. This is going to be a deep draft for running back and wide receiver, so I don't think you need to waste a pick at this position for it. So I think that you go with a safety in this position. Okay, now with the 31st overall pick, we have the Kansas City Chiefs, and they desperately need help on the offensive side of the football, I'm going to have them taking interior offensive lineman Tyler Booker. I think you can go either offensive tackle like Josh Connerly, or you can go interior offensive lineman like Tyler Booker. Either way, that offensive line was absolutely gutted and shredded by Philadelphia in the Super Bowl. So I think it's a clear indication that you need help on the offensive line. Now, we've reached the last and 32nd overall pick. I will have, Philadelphia, they need help on the edge. They need help at safety. So, this might be a little bit of a reach, but I still like Philadelphia's defensive line. I'm going to have them drafting Xavier Watts, safety from Notre Dame. I think that, Philadelphia, they're so well-rounded that they don't need much anymore. They don't need pretty much anything. They're set offensive line, wide receiver, tight end, running back, D-line, linebacker, DB, safety. Philadelphia is just a juggernaut, and I think they're going to be pushing for back-to-back Super Bowls. Kind of like what Kansas City has been doing this past couple years. I think that's what Philadelphia will be doing next. And that completes my 3.0 mock draft, my final mock draft before this Thursday, before the 2025 NFL Draft. And I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, leave some comments down below. I'm your host, Dominic Lako. God bless.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want, and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up.